is just on you.
Oh, he's on me. I'm dead.
Ranger's dead. Oh, I'm dead to a this Magus. That's so embarrassing. Nice. It's two dead. Bacon's 1v1ing this guy around.
Wakey,
Hit him in the head with a book.
wakey.
Dodging him and hitting him with a book. It's insane. That was actually mental.
Wake up, it's time for school. Come on, man. Are you ready for school?
What is up, YouTube? Pastor Bacon here again with episode 5 of Timmy Talk. Timmy Talk, of course, is a series that is dedicated to helping those that are new to the game of Dark and Darker experience greater success in the dungeons. Well, I hope you guys are doing well today. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the stat sheet. Now, before you click off this video, because I know for many that may be a little bit boring, what we're actually going to do is really just cover some highlighted stats rather than just going simply down the stat sheet. Before we actually get into the actual discussion here, I want to talk about two specific resources that I would encourage you guys to use in considering stats. The first is actually the Spell and Guns Dark and Darker Wiki, which I highly recommend. I find that I mainly use them for the map resource they have available, but you'll also notice that in the top of the description, I actually link their stats page. Yes, they actually have a full section on just stats and how they work, how they scale, and all those things. So I encourage you to check that out. If you are a reader like myself, it's going to be a great resource for you. If you're not a reader, what I have attempted to do, and you'll see this actually used in the video today, just something I've put together to the best of my ability to just kind of be a intro to the stat sheet. I find that just scrolling down, seeing all the numbers, all the different words, the first time you see those things can be a little bit scary, a little bit confusing. You're not too sure how these things connect. I am a person who loves to color code, and so I've color coded a stat sheet so that you'll see that the colors on the top attributes actually match what they actually affect down below. So hopefully that's efficient and helpful for you guys. And also I've added some notes onto this as well. Maybe there's just a little bit more clarification that's needed there. If you're already familiar somewhat with the stat sheet, but you also more so want to just know what stats you should be building on what specific character, I encourage you to actually look more so to the end of this video. You'll see that it's actually chaptered near the end of this video, because we're going to actually finish out this episode talking about what stats you should be looking for depending on what class you play. So let's go ahead and get into this conversation about stats. There's no need for me to just simply go through all of the base attributes that your character can build on gear or how they start, because I think you guys are already aware of those things. So let's actually start with the health. Your health is actually determined specifically either by your vigor or your strength, even though strength gives less health than vigor does, or any additional health rolls you have, such as plus max health or max health bonus. Having good HP allows you to basically survive in the dungeon and prevents you from basically being one shot, although sometimes it still happens. Your memory capacity basically is, well, the capacity you need for casting spells. You notice there's actually 3 numbers in this section, and I want you to understand that the top number is the actual amount of capacity or memory capacity that you have with currently what you're wearing. Also, just a quick note here, know that if you bring in, say, a spell book that has additional memory capacity, when you're in the lobby, that is not currently being added to your actual memory capacity. This is because, well, your equipped items or things that you need to pull out and equip in the dungeon do not affect your stat sheet until you actually get into the dungeon and pull that item out. This is also true for non-casters. If you're building a max health on, say, a longsword, building 5 max health on that longsword, you will not see that 5 health apply until you actually get into the dungeon and pull that longsword and then check your stat sheet. Again, back to memory capacity. The top number is what you actually have, and depending on what you're playing, if you need spells or if you need music, if you're on Bard, those numbers specifically reflect your actual payload, how much you need to be able to play everything or cast everything you have currently equipped. Also, I'm currently planning to build just a couple tips for Bard. I know that Bard can be a scary class to get into, and so one of the things we'll talk about in that future video is how to work out your spell payload so you don't need as much memory capacity, and instead you can build more health, more damage, more dexterity. Tied to the vigor stat, your health recovery bonus specifically is how fast you're able to recover health while sitting on the ground. This also includes sitting at campfires, and also wizards using meditate while sitting on the ground. Similar to that is spell recovery bonus, but this is actually regaining spell charges. So characters like wizard or cleric, where you have a limited amount of spells that you can use or spell slots that you have, you actually will recover those spells faster the more knowledge that you have. Your dexterity actually affects action speed, your manual dexterity, and your equip speed. This means that dexterity makes basically anything that you have to do with your hands on screen applies much faster. So not just attacking faster, but also, say, pulling out a potion, drinking it, that's faster. And also swapping from your primary weapon to your secondary weapon. You probably have noticed if you've ever fought a very geared bard that they're able to pull out their crossbow very, very quick because bards have been building really high dexterity, which means that their equip speed is through the roof. Simply put, your regular interaction speed or your magical interaction speed reflects how fast you interact with that specific type. Simply put, magical interaction speed is basically opening portals, and regular interaction speed is basically interacting with everything else, such as doors, applying traps, and how quickly you loot things such as chests. I know buff duration and debuff duration can be a little bit tricky for some new players. I want to be very clear that buff duration simply increases how long buffs remain on your character. This is not a stat that increases how long you increase the buffs of other characters. So if you are, per se, like a bard or a wizard in the backline trying to, I don't know, cast haste and a viz on another player, having more buff duration on your character will not increase how much the buffs you're applying to them increases. They need to build buff duration on their stat sheet so that their buffs last longer. On the flip side, debuff duration, in the same way, it only applies to you. Also, it can be a little bit tricky because as you build more debuff duration, you'll notice that it goes more into the negative. So actually building more debuff through either will or through the actual stat debuff duration, it actually makes your debuff stat show that you have less or more into the negative. But what you need to understand is that less is more. Having, say, minus 40% debuff duration, it means that you're actually reducing all the debuffs applied to you by 40%. Cleric actually has a perk called Protection from Evil, which I would argue is one of the best perks in the entire game. Why? Because debuff duration, it means if you're ever slowed, if you ever have any type of a negative effect, say like a Warlock curse, having close to 40 or 50% debuff duration means those things only last for half the time, which means something like Curse of Pain, which could last, say, 8 to 12 seconds, now on the Cleric only lasts 4 to 5 seconds. For all of our new healing druids out there, I highly recommend that you build buff duration and debuff duration because they will both increase the duration that you are in Dreamwalk and decrease the time that it takes to get it back. I wanted to clarify just briefly how armor penetration works because I actually got this wrong for a very long time. What you need to understand is however much armor penetration you have does not simply flat reduce the amount of overall PDR or physical damage reduction the other player has. So for example, if you have 30% armor penetration and you go up against a fighter that has, say, 60% PDR, or again, physical damage reduction, what you're not simply doing is minusing 30% of their 60% and then giving them 30% PDR left. What you're actually doing is mitigating through a percentage of their armor based off how much armor pen you actually have. So in the example I just gave, 30% armor pen versus a fighter with 60%, you would actually reduce him to 42% PDR. If you're still confused, I understand, but this is because 30% of 60, the amount of PDR that they have, would be 18. And then you then subtract that number, 18, from the amount of PDR that they have, that being 60, which gives you 42% PDR. I feel like the rest of the stats are pretty self-explanatory, but I just wanted to highlight where specifically the numbers you should be looking for on physical power bonus and magic power bonus are located. It's actually the top number that actually affects how much damage that you do respectively. The numbers that are below that are simply just telling you how you actually got to the number you see there. So in the example presented here, my physical power, you notice, is only 13, whereas I have 6.2% bonus. If I only had 13 physical power, I'd actually be in the negative. But because I have 6.2% bonus, that's added to the actual -4, which leaves us with 2.2. Also at this time, I just wanted to show you a few stats on the screen that we got from the Dark and Darker wiki about how there's certain curves with both magic power bonus and physical power bonus. You'll see those on the screen right now. Now let's get a little bit into what you should be building depending on what your class is. Now you need to understand that this is generic information. I'm painting very broad strokes here and just in general of what I see is the best on these specific classes. Obviously there are different types of builds, which obviously with that means you need to build different stats. So do not take this as just a clean one all be all to what stats you should be building. In fact, if you want a specific build guide for how you want to play your class in your specific playstyle, join the Dark and Darker Fan Club Discord. Link is in the description below. We have already actually helped a few people build their specific arena kits to help them play in the way that they find enjoyable, but we also help them build the stats that help complement their playstyle and their character. Again, link is in the description below. So let's get into this, starting, of course, with the fighter. The first stat I think of when I hear fighter is physical damage reduction. They are, in fact, one of the best tanks in the game, and I stand by that. Being able to actually reach the highest amount of PDR in the game because of your specific perks allows you to tank lots and lots of physical damage. So for that reason, I would say physical damage reduction or armor rating being probably the best stat you can build on fighter. But to complement this, PDR only goes so far if you don't have the health pool to actually back it up. So make sure you're building enough health to actually complement your PDR. The more health you have, the more your PDR is allowed to work for you. Hopefully that makes sense. For the Barbarian, it's a given that the most important thing you should be building is high health. Whether you're a speed Barbarian or if you're trying to be more tanky, having a health pool of 180, 190, even 200 helps you stay alive and frontline for your team. There's a few different types of ways to actually build Barbarian, but I still argue that building action speed into the positive, about 10%, helps you greatly in your fights. Also, I find that Barbarian needs less of the true physical damage stat, and actually can be just as successful from building base stats like strength, vigor, agility, and dexterity. For the rogue, it's very important that you are building high movement speed. In fact, if you're able to, I encourage you to get to the cap of 330. On top of this, having good action speed is important, but more important than that, I think, is just having true physical damage. Because you're fighting with a dagger that attacks very quickly in fast little jabs, all that true physical damage starts to add up very quickly. Think if you have, say, 7 true physical damage and you're able to go and stab someone 3 times, not only are you doing the damage of the base damage of whatever dagger you're using, but you're adding onto it 7 true physical damage for each stab. So 7 times 3 being 21 extra damage. Similar to the rogue is the ranger. I find that building both high move speed and true physical damage helps you win fights as ranger. However, the ranger needs action speed much more than the rogue does, and I encourage you to build physical power bonus on both classes. The wizard's main stats are knowledge and will. Why? Because you want high spell casting speed and high magic power bonus. In addition to this, having high true magic damage allows you to excel as the DPS for your team. However, it's also important on Wizard to have enough move speed to be able to kite, and to have enough HP in your HP pool so that you're not basically two-shot by rangers. Cleric also benefits from knowledge and will, but I highly encourage you to focus on magical healing. Building as much magical healing as possible as a healer cleric allows you to heal huge portions of health for your team. The rest of the stats are depending on how you're playing. I see some clerics trying to focus on just backlining for their team. In that case, build more so move speed, will, and magic healing. And I see some clerics that try to flip the roles and have the ability to either frontline or backline heal. In that case, still build as much magic healing as possible, but make sure you also build up high health pools with physical damage reduction, and make sure that your action speed is also fast enough where you can deal enough damage in melee. One of the best stats that we've actually been seeing from the Bard lately is actually dexterity. Dexterity on the Bard is actually really beneficial in that you're able to use your buff rotation much faster, because dexterity increases the speed in which you play your instruments. On top of this, if you're running a crossbow, you can quickly swap from, say, a rapier and buckler to a crossbow very, very quickly, which can catch someone off guard. I believe I already said this before in the channel, but Warlock stats are quite expensive. To limit it to 3, you'd need high move speed, magical healing, and true magic damage. Move speed allows you to stay kited while you continuously leech off your enemies. Magical healing allows you to keep your health pool high, and true magic damage allows you to do more DPS. Other Warlock greatly benefits from their current +5 all buff. You're still going to have to swipe your credit card to play Warlock in high gear. Druid's kind of an interesting class in the sense really it depends on the person's build. Obviously, if you're building a Panther form Druid, you need a lot of agility. If you're building a Bear form, you need lots of strength. If you're building a hybrid build between the two, obviously you have to mix match stats to your liking. We're also seeing that healing druids are becoming more popular, using a dagger with a crystal ball to cast and deal damage. If you are building a healing druid, I encourage you to test building high health with magical healing, but then also buff and debuff duration. The buff and debuff duration will help you greatly in your dreamwalk state, and having magical healing increases the amount of heals that you have for your team. And with the sorcerer, honestly, you could build them similar to as you would a wizard. But one thing I will mention is that your magic power bonus goes a much longer way, because the scaling on your spells is much higher than that of the wizard, the warlock, or say even the cleric's damage spells. So aim for as high as magic power bonus as you can get, But obviously, don't forget true magic damage, which is obviously the cherry on top. On top of this, Sorcerer is very slow. It's a very slow caster. So increase your movement speed up to where you're able to kite efficiently, but also don't forget about resourcefulness. This will decrease the amount of time that you have to wait for your spells to come back. If you're playing in a trios mode as a sorcerer, I highly encourage you to build primarily resourcefulness. Otherwise, you may find that it's difficult to compete in trios as a sorcerer because you're waiting for your cooldowns for a majority of the fight. Again, this is just a basic explanation of what stats do and what stats are good on what characters in general. Obviously, different builds require different stats, so this shouldn't be how you build 100% of the time. Well, that's all I really have for you guys today. I hope that you will benefit from this information. Obviously, there's numerous little intricate details that we can't quite cover in this video without it being much longer. And so if you still have questions about stats in Dark and Darker, feel free to ask those in the comment section below. Once again, don't forget to check the description for both the link to the Spelling Guns Dark and Darker wiki website. Also, if you want your own copy of the visuals that I used in this video in explaining the stat sheet, make sure to join the Dark and Darker fan club Discord. We actually have those linked as well. Episode 6 of Timmy Talk is actually yet to be decided, so give me some ideas in the comment section below on what you guys would like help with. Also, I have a question for you guys. Let me know in the comment section below if you would be interested in a Timmy Talk live stream. This would be a live stream that would happen on occasion where I would play with viewers and be able to help them in real time with whatever questions they may have about Dark and Darker. But I thought this might be a cool way to actually meet you guys in the community and a way to rapid respond answers to your guys' many questions. I'm sorry that it takes so long to make these episodes, so this would actually be a way for me to actually knock out a bunch of questions in one time, and it actually could be featured as a full episode of Timmy Talk. Again, if you're interested in that, please let me know in the comment section below. Other than that, I won't take up any more of your time, and so we will see you in the dungeons. Bye-bye.